Hello, Johnnies Nation. What is up? I am Frank Malfetta. I am on high, everybody's favorite Big East blog and podcast. I know it has been a hot minute. I don't think I put out an episode since December 1st. I haven't really blogged in that time as well, so my apologies for that. The holiday season got the better of me. Also, my busy season in my day job, because believe it or not, I do have a day job. I wish somebody would pay me to do this, but unfortunately, I do this for the love of the game. So, a lot has transpired in that last month for our beloved Johnnies. December 1st was the last one I did right after we came back from Vegas. Since that time, we came home, beat Ole Miss 63-58, a performance that did not inspire much confidence in the Johnnies. Then we took care of business versus Iona by 27 points, 91-64, before finally opening league play against DePaul, winning that one handily by 13 points, a game that was never really in doubt and really felt more of a blowout than that 13 points would indicate. And then we had the big one down in Atlanta, facing Rick's favorite program, the Kentucky Wildcats, and we lost 78-66, a game that we absolutely should have won, a game that was there for the taking, a game where we had a halftime lead. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Yes, the Johnnies once again blowing a halftime lead, this time in Atlanta. 32-25 halftime lead they had, wound up with a 78-66 loss. Outscored 53-34 in that second half. Absolutely abysmal. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm not here to focus on individual games. Here to talk a little bit big picture, since I haven't been here in a while. It just doesn't make much sense to go ahead and focus on these individual games that are long since behind us. One last result after that, just the other day, or just about a week ago now, we came out and took care of business against Harvard, 85-59 at Carnesecca Arena. So that brings us to the present. What's going on with our Johnnies? What is the problem with this program? Because this is, frankly, unacceptable performances in out of conference play this year. A lot of money was invested in this program. We have a Hall of Fame head coach. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever that this team could not have gotten two more of those other four wins. I'm not asking for much, even just one. If you just took care of the ending of that Iowa State game and you win, now you've got a signature resume. Now you've won 3 games out of 6 against high majors, and everything looks a lot rosier. If you won 2, let's say you beat Auburn, Iowa State and Auburn. Well, then maybe you're winning the fucking players error or something. But let's say you do it. Now you got only 2 losses. Now you're 9-2. You got 2 wins over top 40 programs in Ken Palm, and things are rosy. But instead, what we've seen is this team is just completely incapable of rising to the occasion, and I don't know where that stems from. I don't know if it's because we're outmatched. I don't think so. I think there's a ton of talent on this team. I don't think it's because we're getting outcoached. We have one of the best coaches to ever do it. And I mean, I don't want to say it, but is it a matter of will and desire and want? Last year, this program was full of dogs. We had guys that wanted it. We had guys, Rick talked repeatedly about how much those guys hated to lose, and it showed every time they stepped on the court. And I just, you watch this team, and I don't know that I get the same vibes from them. So, where does that leave us? What are the issues? That's what I'm here to talk about. What the fuck is wrong? So, the one I've been talking about all year, you can go back to my first podcast when we were just covering the Quinnipiac and Alabama games. And you'll see what it was I was talking about. I talked about it again in the second podcast I did on St. John's right after Vegas. It's the defensive rebounding. It's been an absolute abomination. It's been the bane of this team's existence, and it's probably the single thing that has cost us the most games this year. I think. I don't think that's a controversial take. I think it's been pretty obvious what these teams have done to us. Let me just pull up the game log here so I can just run through some of these defensive rebounding results that we've had here. Or let's say opponents' offensive rebounding results, I should say. 13, 11, 23, and 13. That's Alabama, Iowa State, Baylor, and Kentucky. So those are the ones that have killed you on the offensive glass, pulling down a lot of rebounds. And they make you pay for it. They've all poured in the second chance points. Even Baylor didn't pour in the second chance points, and that's the problem there. They let us off the hook, and it was still a problem in that game, though. And on the season, our offensive rebound percentage against is 34.5%. That means opponents are grabbing 34.5% of the rebounds in our defensive half. That is the 18th percentile in America. I would be shocked. I don't have the whole list in front of me, but I'd be shocked that there's very many high majors ranked that lowly in the country in opponent's offensive rebound percentage, particularly when you factor in that half of the schedule, maybe more depending on the team, half of every high major schedule at this point has been bye games. Half of our schedule has been bye games. And, a couple of pretty weak high majors for what it's worth with DePaul and Ole Miss. And yet our opponent's offensive rebound percentage is still that abysmal. So why? What's the issue? Well, this year for me, I think it's schematic and personnel. It's X's and O's and it's Jimmy's and Joe's, I think, in this case. And what do I mean by that? Well, last year, it was no secret. Everybody remembers we were a great rebounding team last year on both ends of the floor. Why? Because you had guards that could rebound. And I'm going to focus this on the defensive rebounding because I think that's the bigger issue. The offensive rebounding this year has not been as bad. Our offensive rebound percentage has been 38%, 93rd percentile, and even against the high majors, we pulled down the offensive rebounds at a pretty decent clip. So last year, I went back. I pulled our 11 best performances. For me, that was New Mexico, UVA, KSU, all 3 wins against Marquette. Funny to think of beating Marquette as a good win given where they're at now, but last year it was. The 2 wins against UConn, the 2 wins against Creighton, which were home and in the Big East tournament, and then, of course, the L versus Baylor in the Bahamas, which was still a very good performance from us despite the result. So in those 11 games, and I did that because also, we've played 12 games now, so it's close. And I also just wanted to kind of really bring the comparison into focus because you're talking again about 12 games where 5 of them have been against low majors, bye games, mid majors, versus 7 of them that have been high major programs, one of which being DePaul, one of which being a bad Ole Miss team. So this is just in those really, good performances against tougher teams. Let's say. And, maybe I probably should have included the loss against Creighton as well, just to get a little more variety in there and not cherry pick our only the good performances, but here we are. In any event, I don't think that really matters because it's more about the ratio here than the individual numbers. In those 11 performances, the guards now, we're talking about the guards, and for me last year, that's Kadari, Davon, Sim, Lefty, Glover, and I included RJ in this. Why? Because for my money, RJ was a perimeter player predominantly. He's not down there in the post banging around. And so for that reason, I marked him with the guards. If he was pulling down a rebound, it's because he was crashing in from the perimeter like a guard. So that group of guards, 185 defensive rebounds versus 91 defensive rebounds for the forwards and centers. So that would be Zuby Scott, Vince Rubin, Io, and I threw Dunlap in there just because I felt the need to even out the numbers there. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio, almost exactly, but for guard rebounds to forward rebounds last year. The guards covered up a lot of rebounding woes from our front court, and I use the word woes because on paper it looks bad that your big men were pulling down less than 10 rebounds, less than 9 rebounds per game defensively as a unit, not individually, as a unit. The guards last year, 9 per game defensively in those 11 games. The guards covered up a lot of the defensive rebounding issues that our front court had, and again, issues, I don't mean that necessarily negatively. I mean it in the sense that they didn't pull down a lot of defensive rebounds, not necessarily because they weren't skilled or they weren't doing their jobs, but because that's not the way the system was designed. And we'll come back to that. This year's team, across all the performances to date, I just took the per game numbers here to make it easy, but the guards, 11.2 defensive rebounds per game. And so the guards, Sellers, Shannon, Jackson, Darling, Lefty, Odie. And your forwards, 12.5 defensive rebounds per game. Zuby, Mitchell, Hopkins, Prey, and Io. So again, basically a 1-to-1 ratio. And so what does that say about this year? Well, obviously it looks to me that Rick wants his guards to rebound, and he said as much in press conferences this year, and we saw how it played out last year, that having guards that rebound was key to the success and was something that we were actively trying to do. This year, I think Rick wants to play the same way. He said he wants the guards to rebound more, but the guards don't have that same rebounding ability that last year's guards did, and it's as simple as that. And from where I sit, it looks like Rick is trying to jam a round peg into a square hole rather than just going out and getting a square peg. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at those guys when they came in last year, you look at a guy like Kadari, his last year at Seton Hall, per game defensive rebounds, 5.3. Comes to St. John's the next year, 5.1. And that plays out if you look at it per game, per 40, per 100. Any category, it's roughly the same. Per 40 was 6.5 to 6.3 at St. John's. Per 100, 9.6 to 9.0 at St. John's. So he came in a great rebounder, stayed a great rebounder. Davon Smith in his season in Utah, 5.3 per game, 3.9 per game at St. John's. So he actually regressed a little bit on the glass. 7.2 per 40, 5.7 per 40, and 10.2 per 100 to 8.1 per 100. But I think there probably wasn't a lot of guards on Utah that season that were rebounding the way, Kadari and RJ was. And then you look at RJ his last year his 1 year at UMass, his freshman year, per game, 3 offensive rebounds. He was basically around that his first year at St. John's. Sorry, it's a little late here. And then up to 5 in his last year at St. John's. 5 defensive rebounds per game, per 40, 5.3 to 6.3. So, again, some improvement there. And per 100, 7.5 to 9.0. And the reason I talk about per 100 and per 40 is because, per 40 helps you account for minutes disparities. Per 100 helps you account for pace of play disparities. So it helps to look at it holistically and see what they're actually producing per game, what they're producing when you control for minutes, and what they produce when you control for those possessions. And I think this, it's pretty obvious to me when you think about the scheme and the way this defense plays why, you need guards who rebound and why that's integral to the system and why our forwards do not get more boards. And I think it has to do with switching, right? We switch a lot. We switch almost everything. You have forwards that can guard the perimeter with Prey and Hopkins and Mitchell and Zuby, of course. So when those guys are pulled onto a switch and out into the perimeter, pretty simple. They're not under the basket at that point, so it becomes much tougher for them to go in and grab a rebound. That's why the guards have to be adept at rebounding and boxing out and flying in. And I think you had that last year. Kadari was a big boy. Kadari could box people out. None of these guards could do that. None of these guards have that strength and that capability, that skill set, and frankly the want to get in there and box out a big man and come down with a board the way Kadari and RJ could. Davon, a little bit of a different animal, and I think that's part of the reason why he might have regressed a little bit here. Just, he couldn't box out those guys when he was switched onto a big, but he was adept at flying in and pulling down a rebound out of nowhere, jumping in front of guys or next to guys or, using his freakish ups and athleticism to get up there and grab some boards from nowhere. So the other thing I want to talk about and touch on here is that if you look at it from a perspective of what the forwards did last year versus what they're doing this year, the group as a unit, the forwards and centers, basically pulling down about the same, maybe a couple more boards, I think, this year than they did last year. But the guards are not pulling their weight, and that's why it's a 1-to-1 ratio this year instead of a 2-to-1 ratio like we saw last year. And so, Hopkins has been coming in for a lot of flack, I think, for his lack of rebounding. And so, I think there is a little bit to that. I do think there's times where he is, out of position, not boxing out hard enough, letting guys fight around him, and just generally being soft on the defensive glass. I do think that's part of the problem. But on the same token, that's not his job necessarily at all times. There's plenty of times where he's pulled away from the basket with defensive assignments, and that's why he's not there to box out and get those rebounds, or why he's got to, sort of fight from behind to get back in the mix to pull down a rebound because of those schematic changes, and because of the fact that with that schematic change, or with that schematic, change for Hopkins, it's a schematic change. With that scheme comes, having to accept and needing guards that can rebound, and they're just not getting in there and pulling their weight in that regard. And so, while Hopkins certainly deserves some criticism, I don't think, that's the end-all be-all, and I don't think any of the forwards really deserve a ton of the criticism for the rebounding woes. I think it's incumbent upon either the guards to figure it the fuck out, or on Rick to realize I don't have guards that can rebound the way Kadari and Davon and RJ could. I need to figure something else out here. I need to change the scheme. Maybe we don't switch as much. Maybe, we switch back more. Whatever the case may be, you got to figure out. And, people love to talk about fit. Last year, they used fit to say, oh, well, you have too many guards, too many point guards with Davon and Kadari. And, okay, the two of them are integral to our success. So, I think fit as a word, I hate it because I think too many people use it as kind of a cudgel for just, I don't really like this team. I don't see what the coach is trying to do. And they use it against us last year. They use it against us this year. They were dead wrong last year. This year, they're proving a little bit right. But I think it matters in this regard because the fit is the issue here. When you, as I covered just a little earlier, you brought in a bunch of great rebounding guards last year. You brought in Kadar, you brought in Davon, you had RJ, you developed his rebounding skills over the course of 2 seasons. This year, you went out and brought in some incredibly talented guards, and guards that plugged a hole we had last year when it comes to the 3-point shooting, because all 3 of them are great shooters. I don't think Jackson has had the best shooting season just yet, but he's coming around. Actually, he's up to 37%, so he's getting it back. But I mean, he was close to 40. He was like 39% last year. Sannon is shooting the lights out this year. Sellers shooting the lights out this year. So, well, actually, Sellers struggle a little bit too, I think. But regardless, they're all talented shooters. They all have the ability to make a ton of threes. I don't know, Sannon and Sellers both shooting 40%. Jackson, 36.8%. So, we're not brought in a bunch of talented shooters, but the fit from a defensive perspective, a rebounding perspective, not quite as good. And so when you look at the three guys we brought in last year, the worst rebounding of the three was RJ his freshman year. And if you look at it as a per 40 basis, because he didn't play a ton of minutes his freshman year at UMass, 5.3 per 40. Here's Ian Jackson's per 40 last year at UNC, 3.8. Davon Smith's per 40 at Utah to refresh, 7.2. Kadari's at Seton Hall, 6.5. Ian Jackson, 3.8. Joseph Sannon per 40, 4.5. Hosea Sellers per 40, 2.7. So as you can see, all of these guys are coming in as worse rebounders than the three key guards that we had last year in Davon, Kadari, and RJ. From a rebounding perspective, as well as pretty much every other perspective. But yeah, and none of these guys have really improved that much. I mean, Sellers has gone a little bit better on a per 40 basis, 2.7 to 4.0. One rebound per 40, not that great. Sannon basically flat, 4.5 per 40 to 4.8 per 40. Ian Jackson's improved a little bit, 3.8 to 5.1, but again, just over one rebound per 40 is not, not setting the world on fire, not by any stretch. So, from my perspective, the fit was botched here. And it's not the fit that people were using against us in the preseason where, you got three forwards and they're your three best players or whatever the hell they were saying about the fit in the front court. And I also don't think it's the fit issue of not having a point guard. I think that's raised other issues, but it's not the issue with defensive rebounding. The fit issue here, and it's not one I ever heard anybody talk about, is that you brought in three guards that don't rebound the way Rick Pitino wants his guards to rebound. And that's a problem, and they haven't developed into that. And they might not this year. Maybe next year. We saw some good improvement in RJ over 2 years at St. John. So if either of these guys return that are eligible to return, which is Jackson and Sannon, Sellers, senior, of course, if either of those guys comes back next year, maybe we see something better from them on the glass. But certainly a possibility you're not going to get that from them this year. And so, we'll come back to fit and the transfer portal in a little bit because I do want to close the show later with a sort of some big picture talk. Moving on, I don't want to be completely negative all the time, so let's talk about the offense, right? The offense has its issues also. I know I just said I want to be positive, so let's start with the positive. Ian Jackson, I think, has looked better. He's passed the eyeball test the last few games. I don't think he's an elite point guard by any stretch, but he's turning the ball over less than one time per game. He's only had 2 assists per game, but only in 22 minutes. So, you're closing in on 3+ per 40. Again, not great, but improvement. And 11.3 points per game is something that I'm really excited to see him starting to score. Again, if you extrapolate that out to a 30-minute game, he's scoring close to 15 points per game. So, that's pretty solid. 20 points per 40, pretty solid. So, really happy to see that. The only way this team is going to get where it wants to go into a second weekend is if Ian Jackson can continue to progress, can be a 30-minute per game guy, can, facilitate the offense, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's not necessarily piling in the assists, but if you can be that primary ball handler, be the guy coming off the screen actions in a pick and roll with Zuby and those types of things, if you can do that effectively with the rest of Ian Jackson's skill set, that's what's going to get us to where we want to be. he needs to get better at that facilitating, and I'm hoping it comes. There was a lot of time off this month of December, and we've seen that improvement play out in the games, I think. So, hopefully he keeps getting better, and now he's ready for Big East play, where he's going to get 2 games a week to really go ahead and try to hone those skills. Next one, kind of a positive, but 3-pointers. I really, really want to see them shoot more 3-pointers. Right now, we're shooting 34.6% from deep. If you do the math on that, that works out to 1.02 points per attempt, expected points per attempt. We only shot 147 in our 7 high major games, so that's 21 per game, exactly. Inside the arc, we're only 125 of 256 in those games. That's 0.976 points expected per attempt. Why do I bring this up? Well, that Kentucky game, the biggest issue that I saw offensively was early in the game, particularly the inability to finish at the rim. I think they had 5 blocks in the first 5 minutes of the game. Did Kentucky. And that scared us from going inside. It forced guys to try to get in their heads and do crazy shit around the rim to try and finish around the trees. And it was just very obvious that they were not prepared or not capable of finishing against a team with a strong defensive front court. And that's what's bared out by these numbers. Only 48.8% inside the arc, 0.976 expected points per attempt versus 34% from behind the arc, which is 1.02 expected points per attempt. And I want to note also that 3-point shooting has translated. We're shooting 34.6% on the year, and if you look at just the 7 high major games, we're shooting 34% in those games. So if there's one thing that we have done well and continue to do well against high majors, it's shooting threes. So now, despite that math, which obviously favors more 3-point attempts, just 36.7 of our shots are coming from behind the arc. That's the 36th percentile in the country, just 22 attempts per game. So from where I sit, we need to shoot more. I mean, it's as simple as that. When you can shoot that well, and just to put it in perspective here, let me see if I can find our 3-point percentage. Our 3-point percentage is 63rd percentile in the country. So our 3-point attempts are in the 36th percentile, but our shooting percentage from 3 is in the 63rd percentile. That is part of the problem. And let's look at some other teams that shoot, around where we are, plus or minus a couple points from deep, and let's see what they do per game. We take 22 attempts per game. That's what that works out to of 36.7% of our total shots. Kentucky, 33.7% is their shooting percentage from behind the arc. They take 4 more attempts per game than us. Nebraska ball, one of the surprises of the season, they shoot 34.9% from 3. That's just 0.3% better than us. They take 30 attempts per game. Illinois, one of the best teams in the country, top 10 or 15 team, I think, by most metrics. 35% from deep, so just a slight hair better than us. They take 29.3 attempts per game. Houston, 35.1% from deep, so about a percentage and a half or so better than us. But they still take 5 shots more from behind the arc than we do. And they're a team that also has a pretty good front court. And I know they've been probably overusing Tugler offensively this season, but, again, I think that's a good comparison for a team that has a front court that they're trying to play through, but still managed to take more threes than we do. And then there's Clemson and UNC, both of them shooting even worse than us, a full percentage point less than us, 33.6, and even they are taking 3 more attempts per game than we are. I also, I think generally we can shoot more and we should shoot more, and I think most of the guys on this roster should have the green light to shoot from deep. I mean, Ruben is shooting 50% on, limited, but 50%. 5 of 10 sample there. Sannon, 40%, 17 of 42. Sellers, 40%, 20 of 50. Ian Jackson, 36.8%, 21 of 57. And Bryce Hopkins, 11, 33, that's 33%. Lefty, only shooting 29%, 5 of 17, but I think that's going to come up, I'd imagine. Darling, only shooting 25%, but as we know, he struggled very early and has been a lot better from deep the last few games. Even Zuby, 4 of 17, 23%, so not great, but, he had that one heave that was never going in at the end of the game and the end of the ISU game, and then, he's not supposed to be a three-point shooter. He's your center. And then Dylan Mitchell, the only guy who never want to take a three. He's 0 for 5 on the year. So most of the guys on this roster can take a three. And even Zuby, I want him to keep taking the open ones because he's good enough to keep teams honest from behind the arc. So there's no reason, there's no excuse for why this team doesn't take more threes. And the most frustrating part, it's something that we've all seen most of these games, is guys passing up open looks. I mean, Isaiah Sellers is the king of this. The guy is shooting 40% on the year. He shot 40% last year. You are an elite three-point shooter. You are being paid good money to come here and be an elite three-point shooter. Why are you passing up open looks at three to put the ball on the ground and drive at the rim where you are absolutely atrocious at finishing? I'm sorry, but you're not that guy, Isaiah. You're not. Stop going to the rim. Take the three. When it's there, take it. If it's not there, pass it. I do not want to see you at the rim anymore. You have a role to play. Play that role. If you play your roles, if everybody plays their roles, that's going to help things improve. And your role is to take the three. We're 6-2 when Isaiah Sellers attempts 3 or more three-pointers. 2 or 2 when he doesn't. And those 2 wins when he didn't take 3-pointers were against Quinnipiac and Bucknell. So 2 early season games and 2 bye games, obviously. Against Kentucky and Alabama, he only had 1 3-point attempt in each game. And if I'm recalling correctly, I think Kentucky was the game where he didn't take one until there was like 4 minutes left in the game or something, was when he got that 1 attempt off. So not great. We're also 6-2 when Sannon attempts 3 threes or more, 2-2 when he doesn't. The wins there when he didn't were against Baylor and Quinnipiac, and the L's against Kentucky and Alabama. And of course, in the Kentucky game, I don't know why he didn't take more threes. He like I said, he's a great shooter, but at least he was getting to the line and went 12 of 12 from the line in that game. But again, those are your 2 best 3-point shooters. They're both shooting over 40% or 40% on the nose. You got to get them more looks, and I think, again, some of this is on Rick and the staff. Some of this is schematic. You got to run sets and find ways to get good looks for your shooters. That's what teams do. That's what great teams do. And you have to understand that certainly Sellers cannot create his own shot. Sannon, maybe a little bit more, but again, not at his best when he's trying to create his own shot. Ian, I think, can create his own shot a little bit more, especially when he's coming off like a nice pick. I've said it before, but in Vegas, they had that great, high screen pick and roll at the top of the key, and Jackson was just so dangerous off that action because if the defender tried to press up into him, he could blow by them. If the defender sags off, he could take the three, and whichever way the defender decided to play it, he could always take a step and do his patented step back three. And he hit a couple of those in Vegas, and I really liked it. But other than that, the other guys, you really got to run the sets to get them the looks that they need. And I know, sets are really not a part of the offense. It's a motion offense. But again, this goes to the fact that you can't keep jamming square pegs into round holes. The rebounders, the guards are not rebounders, and your shooters are not creators. So defensively, you have to adjust and figure out a way to get your forwards in better positions to rebound. And offensively, you have to find a way to, within the flow of the offense or by instituting some sets or whatever the case may be, you have to find a way to get your shooters better looks. Especially when the game is starting to get away from you. You need a silencer. You need a guy. And look, these guys are 40% shooters. They can do it. You need to get them the looks to silence that, to stop the run before it gets out of hand, to keep the game close before it gets out of hand. And that's not something we've done. And I think, my last point on the offense, again, another negative here, and I think it goes hand in hand with that, is that the offense, when the games have been on the line, has struggled, really, really struggled to get good looks. And I don't know what it is. I can't diagnose it. But I know that entire second half against Kentucky, we could not get a good look. Down the stretches against Auburn and Alabama, we could not get good looks. I don't know if the assholes clench. We get pretty good looks a lot of the other time within the flow of the motion offense. I don't know if it's a matter of teams waiting till find something in the defense and sitting on it until they really need it late in the game, and we're caught flat-footed and unable to adjust. I just don't know the game that well. I haven't even looked at it that closely, but I don't know what it is. But you've got to find a way to get better, easier looks when you need them. I mean, that's what it boils down to. When you need them, you got to find a way to get easier looks. So I already covered the stats of the day back when we were talking about the threes. That's the stat of the day, is that, we're shooting 34.6% from deep, but we're only taking 36.7% of our shots from behind the arc. That's your stat of the day. So let's jump in the next step here, the metrics rundown. Tournament here is still the most likely outcome. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it and blah, 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 but facts are facts. At this point in time, in Bart Torvik, the preseason projections have almost entirely been phased out, and when you do so, you can go look at one of the coolest pages on the internet, all free at Bart Torvik too, which I love and respect Bart for. You can go over to his TourneyCast page. St. John's still a 98.3% favorite to make the NCAA tournament. So again, that is the most likely outcome. Let's talk a little bit more about the individual metrics here. Bart Torvik, if you remove the priors, St. John's is 21st. 40th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 19th in adjusted defensive efficiency. Ken Palm, 20th, 39th in offensive efficiency, 18th in defensive efficiency. BPI, which is ESPN's proprietary efficiency metric, which does appear on the team sheets, we're 17th. Net, 29th. KPI, which is one of the resume-based metrics, 26th. That is our highest resume-based metric. SOR, another resume-based metric. This is ESPN's companion to the BPI. We are 49th there. And then in the WAB, the wins above bubble, which is the NCAA's proprietary resume-based metric, and frankly the single most important metric last year if you look at what the correlations were with rankings and teams that got in and seeding, WAB was the most highly correlated last season. So in that metric right now, we're 50th. And to put that in perspective, last year, there was only 2 teams in the top 50 of WAB who did not make the NCAA tournament. And it wasn't that there was teams below 50 that got in. That's just the maximum number with the way bid thieves and everything else worked out last year. 2 top 50 teams were going to get left out no matter what. So being in the top 50, generally a pretty good bet you're going to make it into the bracket. And why do I point that out? Well, before I get there, Torvik also has his own version of WOB, and we're 61st in that version of WOB. And I want to bring this up because the NCAA's WOB is a black box. Torvik's WOB gives you a lot more detail and information. So I'm going to focus on his WOB. But at the end of the year, you can expect to see these two WOBs come pretty close to each other, particularly as the efficiency metrics kind of hone in on each other later in the season. Net is a very large efficiency component, but also a resume component in net as well. In any event, WOB is cumulative. And what do I mean by that? For every game, you get a WOB score. That score is from 0 to 1. And it's effectively the percentage that a bubble team would win any given contest given the opponent and location, right? So what I like about Torvik's version of WOB is if you go to the team page for your team, he shows you what every game is worth in the WOB based on the current rankings. So from there, you can kind of extrapolate out where your WOB is going to end up. And I did that. I took out and I went and I gamed out 15-5. I should say, just to flip back to WOB. So let's say a bubble team has a 75% chance of winning a given game. That means if they win that game, their WOB is 25%. Because they were likely to win that game. A bubble team's going to lose that game more. You get the smaller of the two numbers. When you lose a game, you get that percentage subtracted to you from your WOB score. So if you were 75% chance to win per Torvik's projections, then you get minus 0.75 from your WOB. And so it just adds up and subtracts over the course of a season. So I gamed out what 15-5 would look like from here. For the record, we are minus 0.6 right now, so we are not great. But again, we're only 61st here. If you go 15-5, let's chalk both UConn games up as losses, and let's chalk up losses at Creighton, at Nova, and at Hall. If you do that, it gets you to a WOB of 3.21, and that would have gotten you to 29th in Torvik's WOB rankings last year, which would have given you about a 6th or 7th seed based on the teams that were in that vicinity last year. Go back 2 years ago to 2024, 3.21 WOB score would be 17th in Torvik's WOB. That would have equated to about a 3 to 5 seed based on the teams that were ranked in that vicinity 2 years ago. And if you go all the way back 3 years ago to 2023, that would have finished 24th and also been in that 4, 5, 6-ish range there. And then 15-5 is what I gamed out, but it's very easy to see what happens if we go 14-6 instead, or if you go 16-4 instead, because every game you add to the win column just flips a whole point, right? Because if you got a 0.25 for winning a game, and now you flip that to a minus 7.5, that's a 1 point swing. So that's the way it works for every game. So if you wanted to figure out where we'd be with, 16-4, we'd be at 4-2-1. We'd move up a few spots in the WOB rankings, and probably a seed line or two for each additional WOB win. For each additional win from a WOB perspective, I should say. So all that is to point out that even though the Big East is down, just winning the games you're supposed to will likely be more than enough to land you a decent seed. And by decent seed, I mean 7 or better, so that you can avoid the dreaded 8-9 game and then a 1 seed. So if you look at our average seed per Torvik, if you look at our average seed per Torvik, 5.9 in his projections of this 20 cast, that's the average seed. So basically a 6 seed is our average result. If you look at the percentages, basically you have a 40% chance to get a 5 seed or better. That's a 7.5% chance at a 3. I think there's even a small chance at a 2. Yeah, 1.8% chance at a 2. So again, those two very unlikely. 13.6% chance at a 4 seed and an 18.9% chance at a 5 seed. So if you sum up those four totals, you get something over 40%, 41% there, I think. If you keep going, the 6th seed, we have a 21.4% chance of landing the 6th seed. So again, the most likely outcome. And if you total that up, that's a 61.4% chance of getting a 6th seed or better. 17% chance of a 7 seed. So 78.4% chance that we land a 7 seed or better. So again, that is not where we wanted to be, right? I think we all were hoping we'd be fighting for a top 1, 2, 3 seed again, given the preseason hype, the expectations, the amount of money spent on this roster, the talent that this roster still possesses. But the sky is not falling. The season is not over. And the other part of this is that, we still have those really strong efficiency metrics. And so those will continue to buoy us throughout the season. Also important to note that the KPI loves us. If you've been following me for a while on Twitter, you know I'm not a fan of KPI. I think it's a crap metric. I think it's a poorly designed metric. But it likes us this year. So I won't complain about it this year, I guess. And if that stays true to the case, we'll have we should finish the year with a really good Torvik, a really good Ken Palm, a really good BPI, and then pretty good net and KPI scores. So, and again, the WOB should come up into the 20s as well, just by going 15-5. So, I think metrically we're in good shape, and if you wanted a comparison, I would look at last year's Creighton team. Maybe they didn't do great in out of conference play. They went 7-4. They were 1-4 against the Torvik top 60, and they went 15-5 in league, and they got a 9 seed. And I know you're saying, Frank, you just told me we're not going to get worse than a 7 seed. Well, I said probably, but also they didn't have efficiency metrics quite as good as we have this year, and that I expect us to finish with this year. Because as bad as the results have been, the efficiency has still been there. Again, you can take the preseason projections and bias out of Torvik, and you're still 21st in efficiency. So you have not played that poorly. So we're going to end up with those better efficiency metrics than Creighton had last year. Creighton finished 38th in net, only 31 in WOB. 2.6 was the WOB score at Torvik. 37th in KPI. 24 in SOR, 26 in BPI, 37 in KenPom, and 33 in Torvik. I would be shocked those last three being the efficiency metrics. I think we probably stay in the top 20 in efficiency metrics this year. I should hope so. So, again, that's where you will probably see that difference. And again, if we go 15-5, we'll have a WOB of 3.2, I think. So that'll have us as a higher WOB rank than Creighton last year. And so, I really thought the comparison there was good from a out-of-conference record standpoint. Granted, they had a win at Kansas, or Kansas at home. I can't remember. Their win was Kansas, who was, good, not great last year, but probably better than Baylor is this year. So they have a better out-of-conference win than us, but our metrics will be much better than theirs come year end if we go the same 15-5 in league that they went last year. And again, they got a 9 seed, so I think again this kind of bolsters that case that like a 7-6-5 seed is well within reach for this team, and we just got to go out there and take care of business. So on continuity, that's my next one here. And really, I'll get to continuity, but I want to talk more overall big picture here as well. This probably should have came before stats. I know we did stats of the day in the metric rundown. Yep. So we're on to the big picture here. So big picture, what went wrong here? Where was the issue? The issue here, this cake was baked in March. The team whiffed on every point guard they attempted to bring in. Rick admitted as much in his press conference after the Kentucky game. I tweeted out the list of guys that there was at least some passing conversation or interest in. Um, you know, Elliot Cadeau being a big one. I know Caden Lewis was a point guard they were trying to recruit as well. Uh, Silas Demery, obviously. Malachi Smith, we've talked to both of them. Demery even came for a visit. Uh, Trying to think here who else we had a very very brief conversation with Rob Wright before he chose BYU. Um, who else? Oh, Xavier Lee, of course. How could I forget Xavier Lee? Um, Nate Calmies. I don't know if we ever even recruited him, but he put us in his like final 5 or 3, whatever fucking number he used. But I don't think we ever even recruited him. Bruce Thornton, another guy, we tried to lure him into the portal, failed there. So yeah, there was plenty of lifts. Melvin Council Jr., another guy that there was some talk with, very preliminary and minor, but nonetheless, another one. So that's when the cake was baked. We whiffed on the point guards, and we went ahead and brought in a guy who's a very, very talented shooting guard in Ian Jackson. But he's not a point guard. We're trying to make him a point guard, and it has not worked. And Rick needs elite point guards. He really does. If you look at that Louisville title team, Smith and Siva, obviously the point guard. Smith was a combo guard, though, capable of handling the ball. Definitely not the distributor Siva was, though. But again, elite guard play generally, let's say. His last Iona team, he had 2 fantastic point guards, and that team was really good. They were poised to be the mid-major that makes a deep run if they didn't get the poor luck of drawing UConn in the first round, and we all know what a wagon UConn was that year. But yeah, he had Clayton and Jenkins. Then Clayton went on to win a national title with Florida, obviously, and we all saw how good Jenkins was for the Johnnies in Rick's first year. Year 2 here, last year here, you had Kadari and Davon. Again, 2 point guards, 2 ball handlers, 2 guys who were ball hawks on defense, and 2 guards that could rebound with the best of them. And so, those are the things that Rick looks for and needs in his guards, and that's what we did not get in the portal. The focus was clearly on the offense, because that was the issue last year. And, I think there was probably, a thought that, hey, let's get guys that are athletic and talented, and we can turn them into defenders. And I don't think that's panned out. I don't think it's panned out the way we needed to. Again, it goes back to the defensive rebounding. I do think Sannon and Jackson have been pretty good defenders at keeping guys in front of them. Sannon makes you want to pull your hair out sometimes, because you'll have one defensive possession where he looks like an elite defender, and he's his feet are moving and he's keeping speedy guards in front of him, and then you look at the next possession where he's completely out of position, and his guy's wide open for a 3-pointer, or he's basically flat-footed as his guy blows by him and gets to the rim 3 steps before Sannon catches up. But I think by and large he has the tools to be a good defender in that regard, other than the rebounding. Same thing with Jackson. I think Jackson does a very good job, especially with each passing game. I think he gets better and better defensively. He has, he's much less prone to mistakes than I think Sannon is on the defensive end, and he does a really good job of keeping guys in front of him with his speed and athleticism. But neither of them have panned out to be the defensive rebounders that we need them to be. And I think, a theory that I've had and I've espoused a few times on Twitter and maybe in a space or a podcast back when I was with Dave, is this idea that like every coach kind of has to have this experience for themselves where they go into the portal and they think it's like fantasy basketball and they just get a bunch of guys that are really talented or get a bunch of guys that have a lot of great stats and think, okay, I'm just going to plug this guy in and everything's going to be, peachy keen, hunky dory, and everything's going to go smoothly. And that's not the case. I mean, you saw Jerome Tang has basically done this every year. I thought he might learn his lessons with Coleman Hawkins. I mean, his first year obviously was very good, but I think every year since then he's kind of fallen victim to this trap of just getting tons of talented guys without any real coherence or system or fit. So the Coleman Hawkins was, of course, the worst example of that. But I do think even this year with PJ Haggerty, it's PJ Haggerty and a bunch of guys that don't really make sense around PJ Haggerty. Bill Self, one of the greatest coaches of all time himself, he's in the conversation, probably a top 10 or 15 coach in the history of the sport. He's fallen victim to this 2 years in a row. The 200 Dickinson years. He had the third class last year when he had AJ Storr, which I think was the worst decision of the two. And then the year before that, when he brought in 100 Dickinson, a couple other guys. He had the number one class that year, I think, in the transfer portal. And they underachieved both years, especially last year where, they were a 7 seed. And that is wildly underachieving for Kansas. So, again, another guy who I think had that mistake. Jamie Dixon, 23-24 down in TCU. He had the third-rated transfer portal class with like 4 or 5 really good guys, headlined by Ernest Uday and Jameer Nelson Jr., and they wound up with a 9 seed. And so, I think Rick is learning that lesson to a certain extent this year. We'll see just how badly it pans out. Hopefully it doesn't pan out badly. Hopefully we can recover it and, get the season back on track in league play and be ready to go come March. But, I think we saw him adjust last year when, we need more offense. He's got to kind of find that balance, I think, again this year between getting guys that can bring the talent offensively while still maintaining the fit and identity and the things that Rick needs to have a successful team. I also think from a big picture perspective, it's the word that's over there in big, bold type, it's the continuity. The best teams out there, they've got more continuity than we do. It's that simple. I mean, if you look at a team like let me just get back to St. John's here. But if you look at a team like Purdue, they're 5th in KenPom right now. They are 7th in the country in continuity of minutes. 58.6% of their minutes are from returning players. 4 out of their 5 starters, plus their 6th and 7th man. They had an elite team, and they went out and added one guy, Oscar Clough from South Dakota State, plugged him into the starting lineup. He fits the need, he fits the system, he fits the role, and he's been playing it to perfection. And that's why Purdue has been as good as they are. UConn, 18th in the country in continuity of minutes, 51.6%, 7th in KenPom right now. They returned 4 out of their 5 starters, and they weren't even that good last year by UConn standards. They certainly weren't top 10 good last year. I think they were closer to the bottom of the top 30, like 29th or something like that, maybe even just outside the top 30 in KenPom. But they returned 4 of their 5 starters, and or I should say 4 of their 5 starters are returners from that roster. And here they are, back at the top of the heap, back in contention for another national title. Iowa State, we saw them up close and personal. They're 3rd in KenPom, 22nd in continuity of minutes, 48.9%. 3 of their starters are returners from last year's roster, as well as their 6th man. Houston, 10th in KenPom, 39th in continuity minutes, 43.9% of their minutes from returners. 3 of their starters are returners, as is their 7th man. Michigan State, 14th in KenPom, 54th in continuity minutes, 41.7. They returned 4 starters and their 7th man. And just to kind of underscore the importance of continuity and what a struggle it can be when you don't have continuity, that 5th starter role at Michigan State has rotated between 3 different guys, which I think just underscores the fact that you have 4 guys that have started every game, and those are 4 returners, and that 5th starting role has rotated amongst a cast of freshmen and transfers. Florida, 12th in Ken Palm, 65th in continuity of minutes, 40.2%. 3 starters plus their 6th, 7th, and 8th men, all returners. Number 8 in Ken Palm, Illinois, 68th in continuity minutes, 40% of their minutes returned 2 starters and their 6th man. Vandy, 101st in continuity of minutes, 34.8%, currently 9th in Ken Palm. They returned 3 starters. Arizona, number 2 in the country in Ken Palm, 104th in continuity of minutes, 34.5%. They returned 2 starters, their 6th and 7th men, and then the rest of their rotation is basically all freshmen. 3 of the starters and 1 more rotation piece, so that gets you an 8-man rotation right there. 4 are freshmen, 4 are returners. So you don't even see a transfer really contributing in a big way, or at least a new transfer. Some of the guys were transfers that are returned for a second year after transferring. Number 11, BYU, 114th in continuity of minutes, 32.6% of minutes from returners. They brought back 2 starters and 2 rotation pieces, and of course filled in with an elite freshman, which will become a theme in the next couple of teams I wanted to mention here. Number 1 in Ken Palm, Michigan, 117th in continuity of minutes, 32% of their minutes returning. 1 starter, Namari Burnett, plus their 6th man, Roddy Gale, as well as their glue guy, Shedder, who's kind of lost some minutes this year. Seen his role diminish a little bit, but he's still playing about 15 minutes a game, and kind of at the end of the rotation. But again, I think he's just an important veteran, glue guy, 4-year Michigan man player. So I think, his presence is important. Number 4 in Ken Palm, Gonzaga, 160th in continuity minutes, 26.1%. They returned 3 starters. Duke, 6th in Ken Palm, 172nd in continuity minutes, 24.4% of minutes from returners. They returned 3 of their starters are returners, and obviously they supplemented that with elite freshmen. Number 15 in Ken Palm, Tennessee, 191st in continuity of minutes, 21.5% of their minutes from returners. 3 of their starters are returners, plus their 6th man. One of those other stars, of course, elite freshman Nate Ament. Ken Palm, number 13, Louisville, 198th in continuity of minutes, 20.7% of their returning minutes. They returned 1 starter plus their 7th man, as well as elite freshman Mikhail Brown. So I think a lot of those teams there at the bottom of that list that you saw that don't quite have the same continuity of minutes, they're the ones getting the elite 5-star freshmen to come in and kind of fill some of those gaps. So we need more continuity is what it boils down to. St. John's continuity ranked 184th, 22.7% of our minutes are from returners. And, of course, we've returned just 1 starter in Zuby Ejiofor. And, our only other returners are 8th and 9th men, Io and Prey. And then, of course, Lefty, who gets spot minutes here and there. So not in the same ballpark as any of those top 15 Ken Palm teams that I referenced above. And why is that? I don't know. Well, you got to find a way to have more continuity. You've got to ask yourself the tough questions about whether or not, developing Sim Wilcher for another year is a better proposition than going out and getting Chase, Joe Sansonone or Ian Jackson or Osiah Sellers. Like, what? It's got to be a consideration. You've got to think about those things. And I don't know that we've necessarily thought about those things this offseason in the portal. I think this offseason was a lot more about, hey, let's just go get the best guys that we can. And, if that means we got to kick some of these guys to the curb, then so be it. And I don't think that's the way. What you see the best teams doing is building a core of starters and getting those guys to stick around and going from there. And obviously, I don't think the answer is the other extreme. I don't think the answer is to be Marquette. Obviously, that's gone poorly for them, and I've been a critic of them even before things started going poorly. I've been a critic of that approach because, frankly, I could do a whole other pod or a whole article about that, and I probably will. But long story short, in my opinion, you're kneecapping yourself by not using the portal because every other team is optimizing their roster in the portal. If they have a hole, they fill it. If you have a hole because a guy that you recruited 3 years ago didn't develop over his first 2 seasons, and now you're dismissing him in the middle of the year, that's a hole that another team had filled already in the portal this past offseason that you did not fill. So you're handicapping yourself. But you need more continuity than we've had if you're going to be successful at the highest level. We can keep going the way we're going, getting 80% of our minutes from transfers and a couple of, 50, 60, 70 ranked freshmen. But you're not going to get to the Final Four that way. You're not going to get to the promised land that way. You're not going to, hell, you might not even make an Elite Eight that way. If you want to be winning these games early in the season, these big out-of-conference games, if you want to be making deep runs in March, you simply got to have more continuity. And so that's going to be, I think, the biggest thing this year. I want Ian Jackson and Josan Sanone back. I know both of those guys. It was discussed with them. Well, maybe not Ian, but I know it was discussed with Sannon that, like, hey, this is a 2-year project. Stick around. And I'm hoping that Ian Jackson can see the light as well. If I'm Rick, I just show him the tape of Zuby and RJ and the improvements they made from year 1 to year 2 under Rick, especially since both of those guys were transfers themselves. Show those guys what you did. Show Ian Jackson and Josan Sanone what you did with Zuby and RJ and how much better they got in year 2. And get those guys to come back and get those guys to make a similar jump and a similar improvement. If you can do that, then you can go into the portal. And I want to keep Ruben Prey, too, for that matter. I think Ruben has been fantastic in his limited minutes, and he probably deserves some more minutes, and I want to see him alongside Zuby. As I know, my good friend Cole Ladshaw over at the Rapid Reaction podcast has long advocated for Zuby and Ruben together. I would like him back next year, too. And if you bring back those 3 guys, I think Ruben could be your starting center next year. And you can laugh all you want, but everybody laughed at me when I said Zuby would be our starting center in February of his first year here. If you bring those guys back, now you've got a really strong core. Now what do you have to do? All you got to do at that point is add a point guard, an elite point guard. And look, maybe you convince Darling to stay around and be the backup again another year as your backup point guard. And if Ian Jackson, maybe he progresses enough that he could be the backup secondary ball handler while playing predominantly the 2. But now you've got a much smaller aim, and you've got a much narrower scope of what you're looking for, right? You're not drinking from the fire hose trying to fill 5 different positions. You've got that concentrated, narrow focus where you can say, I need X, I need Y, I need Z in the portal. And if I get those, now we're golden. You'll have that core of 3 guys with Prey, Jackson, Sannon, and now you just got to go out and get a starting caliber point guard and a big wing, a power forward, stretch 4 type, let's say. Do that, and then plug a couple of guys out of the portal for the bench, or maybe you can keep Lefty or Poto, or maybe Soljanovic gets healthy and can be a contributor next year. Who knows? But the point is that continuity will be key. And I would like our chances much better next year if we start out with that core of 3 than I will if we lose a couple of those guys and have to really go deep in the portal again like this year. Because it's just not possible to get up to speed as quickly as you have to compete at the top level with teams like Alabama and Iowa State and, Kentucky and others that are returning a higher percentage or recruiting higher caliber freshmen that are ready to go, that are NBA ready already, practically. So that's my spiel on continuity and my plea for next year. So let's go move along. Game balls. Again, this is my first episode since December 1, so we've got a few. Ole Miss, Zuby, the only possible candidate for this game. 15 points, 3 of 8 from the field, 9 of 11 at the stripe. Had 9 rebounds, 8 blocks, and 3 steals. And he was the only player with an O rating, an offensive rating above 100, according to Ken Palm. An O rating of 107 for Zuby in that game. That's how pitiful our offense was versus Ole Miss. The Iona game, let's go. Isaiah Sellers, 19 points, 7 of 13 from the field, 4 of 7 from deep, 5 boards, and an assist. DePaul, oh my darling, Dylan Darling, 17 points, 5 of 9 from the field, 3 of 5 from deep, 6 boards, 2 assists, 0 turnovers. Kentucky, I'm so fucking annoyed that I even have to give a game ball for this fucking game, but I'll go Ian Jackson. I think Ian Jackson has steadily improved. He was 4-7 from the field, 2 of 5 from deep, 10 points, 6 defensive rebounds, which I think is important. You know, Rick wants those guards to rebound, so there you go. He had 6 defensive rebounds in this game, 2 assists, 2 steals versus just 1 turnover for Ian in that game. So again, I think a pretty solid all-around performance against our second toughest opponent of the season. So definitely encouraging from Jackson. And then that Harvard game, he backs it up with another game ball, in my opinion. 14 points, 4 of 9 from the field, all 3-pointers, 4 of 8 from deep, 2 defensive rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, and 0 turnovers. So just, good stuff from Ian Jackson. And hope to see more of it. So that's the game balls. Moving along, my favorite segment of the week, the Schadenfreude Minute. If you don't know, this is the minute where we check in with our former Big East brethren. This week, let's check in with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, fresh off getting screwed out of the college football playoff, or so any Irishman will tell you. They had a home game last week with Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Yes, Purdue University, Fort Wayne. That's right, the Mastodons. They went into South Bend and beat the Fighting Irish 72-69. Purdue, Fort Wayne, I think something like 250th or something like that in Ken Palm. It's not good for the Irish. Very bad loss. So, love to see that from the Irish. I, for one, fucking hate Notre Dame. Every dumbass Irishman who's never even gone to college fucking loves Notre Dame, and I can't fucking stand it. Anyway, enough ranting. Let's look ahead. We are entering league play exclusively now, starting with Georgetown, our second league game of the year. We head down to D.C. Georgetown hasn't been great. Started promising with the road win at Maryland, albeit a depleted Maryland team, and then a home win against a pretty good Clemson squad. They went down to Orlando in an MTE that, frankly, I think they should have won. Instead, they came home winless, losing to a middling Dayton squad and a middling Miami team. They then came back, lost to UNC in Chapel Hill, and then just really, really struggled with St. Peter's, needing OT to squeak out a 76-68 victory. And then they started league play 1-1, beating god-awful Marquette in Milwaukee, and then losing at home to Xavier by 3. They are also without Vince Iwachukwu, the former Johnny. Wishing him good health. He had to undergo an undisclosed medical procedure, and frankly, Georgetown has looked pretty bad without him since then. I think he provides a lot for them defensively, and he's been pretty good offensively as well. So, he's been a key piece for there, and it's nice to see him succeed, but he's not going to be there for them this game, and wishing him a speedy recovery. He's obviously been through the ringer, injury and medical wise, over his career, and so you hate to see him have to suffer through that anymore. On the court, Georgetown, not good at forcing turnovers, which I think is good for us. They're not going to put too much pressure on Ian Jackson's ball handling skills, so it'll be another good game for him to continue to learn and grow into that point guard role. They're also not great on the offensive glass, particularly with with Vince Iwuchukwu out. So their rebound rate just 30.9%, 51st percentile, and that's obviously been goosed by a fairly soft schedule that Georgetown has played. So again, those are our two weaknesses. I don't think they can really harm us in either one of those areas. They do like to get out on the break, and they do score a lot in the paint. So those are two things we're going to have to watch and take care of. But I think ultimately this is a game that should not pose any issues. If it does, if St. John's struggles in this game, God forbid St. John's loses in this game, it could be the canary in the coal mine of what would be heading for a pretty bleak season. So yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope the Johnnies take care of business on New Year's Eve in D.C. And then they'll be back on Saturday in the Garden for Providence. Unfortunately, I will not be in attendance. I have given my tickets to my uncles-in-law. I will be attending my mother's 65th birthday up in the Poconos, so no Providence game for me, but I will be watching it on TV. I will be there in spirit, and please yell at the officials for me. I've got some intel. It might be a rough one. So, with all of that said, I'll probably be back. Well, I won't be back until the new year. Obviously, there'll be nothing to talk about between now and New Year's Eve. Once we get back in the new year, hopefully things have settled down for me a little bit personally and professionally, and I should be able to get some more blog posts up. I do prefer the writing aspect of things personally, but I also hope to get out at least one podcast per week, be it on St. John's or the Big East overall. So that's my pledge to you. I hope everybody here had a happy holidays. I am thankful and grateful for those listeners out there. Appreciate you guys giving me a platform. I do this because I enjoy it, but it's nice to know that it resonates with people and that people are listening. And so that's my spiel on the holidays. I hope everybody had a good one, and I hope everybody has a happy new year. My resolution to you, more content in the new year. That's my resolution to myself, too, because I do enjoy doing this, and I just need to find more time to carve out to do so. So wherever you are, have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, and let's go Johnnies.